Hey folks, ChatGPT and other popular LLMs have been around for a number of years now, right? And there's no contesting that they are super and wildly useful utilities, right? But we've heard a number of stories over the years of end users doing silly things like taking sensitive proprietary data and plugging them into these tools without a second thought. That creates a number of issues, right? So that begs the question, is there a benefit to running your own LLMs on premises? If you could do that, would you? Well, today I've got Mike Nelson on the show, and we are talking about running Ollama on premises. Ollama is a open source utility that you can use to spin up your own LLMs on premises, your own AI agents on premises. That way you can control whether the machine talks to the net or not. You can control how the model runs. You can control which models you pull down. You can control how the agent works, right? So we've got that and lots more in today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Hey everyone, it's a new week. That means it's time for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. This is your podcast for sysadmins, by sysadmins, and dedicated to all those tireless tech folks working in the trenches day in and day out to keep our digital world spinning. As always, I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and I've got maybe a familiar face to some folks that watched the last episode he was on. I've got Mike Nelson with me today. How's it going, Mike?
Hey, pretty good. I got a face for radio, so they probably don't know my face, you know? Yeah. So
Well, they do now. And now they know your face if they didn't before, right? So
yeah.
Always good having you, Mike. Appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. So the last time you and I talked, we had a fantastic conversation about how sysadmins and IT pros can start leveraging AI, right? We kind of dive into some of the basics. You know, we talked about GPT and a couple of the other models. We talked about MCP, model context protocol.
Yeah.
I figured I'd have you back on and we'd talk about AI again, but from a more local on-prem perspective.
Got it.
And so
Sure.
we're going to be talking about Ollama and Open WebUI today. But before we get to that, real quick, Mike, for those that may not know who you are, can you give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Andy says, my name's Mike. And I'm a Microsoft MVP in Cloud and Data Center and also Azure PowerShell. I work for a company called Pure Storage. You may know them. Big orange logo everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a tech evangelist by trade. Really, I'm just a nerd, and I've been a nerd all my life, and I think Andy can relate to that.
Sure can.
Yeah. But I started out as a sysadmin. Oh gosh, I'm really old. I'm very old. And I started out as a sysadmin, and I went through all the ranks of help desk and business analyst, and went through engineer, architect, and decided. I don't know, maybe 10 plus years ago, I kind of wanted to get into this whole tech marketing, the technical aspect. And I stay technical. I'm not marketing. And I make that very clear is I work for a marketing division, but I really don't like marketing, to be honest with you. But anyways, I still keep my hands in. I focus on automation. Is my key thing. And I'm not talking just automation for, technology, automation with everything, with life, basically. That's me in a nutshell. I live in the Midwest, just like Andy. We live across the pond from each other.
Pretty much, yep. That pond being Lake Michigan, which big lake.
Yeah.
Very big lake. Well, appreciate it, Mike. And again, good having you, my friend. So
thanks.
Before we get to our Ollama and Open WebUI conversation, we've got some of our recurring segments. And what I've been doing lately is I've been getting a lot of great comments from you folks. I love incorporating community feedback, community thoughts into the show. So what I've been doing is replacing the News React segment with comments and keep the comments coming. I try to feature all the comments that we get on the show, so by all means, if you have a sysadmin story or a funny joke or whatever, right? Send it our way, and we'll talk about it on the show. But today, the comment that we are talking about was it's an interesting comment where it sits. So Eric and I, we recently did a episode on the importance of IT documentation. But in that episode, we also kind of put out a call for info from our listeners. And you folks may remember this. We asked folks on that listen to send in their home lab info. What are you using for home labs at home? Because, and you may have heard the episode by the time that you've heard what I'm talking about now. We're releasing an episode specifically on, building a home lab on the cheap. And this particular commenter provided some commentary on both home lab stuff as well as documentation. And so I'll quote the comment here. The comment says, and I quote, "For networking at home, I use Microtic PoE switches, some Ubiquiti Unify switches, and Ubiquiti Unify access points. I'm hosting the Unify network controller on a local VM, which is a Ubuntu server, they say." They go on to say, "Almost all private home lab documentation is stored in a local hosted Bookstack instance. For years now, I use an external hosted Bookstack instance for all generic information and things like handy commands." And so
Sure.
there's a lot of stuff in this particular comment. First I'm going to say is I know a lot of people that have not come across a Microtic switch.
Yeah.
I have once or twice, and I know that I guess I don't know this for sure, but from what I've seen, they seem to be more popular in Europe than they are here in the U.S. And so that was interesting. I haven't come across Microtic for a while, so that's kind of neat to see. The Unify stuff, people that watch the show, they know I love Ubiquiti. So I've got Ubiquiti in the house as well, too. The only thing that I'm doing differently is I have a UDM Pro, which handles the network controller portion of, all the other stuff on my network.
Are you sure this commenter isn't in the UK or in EMEA?
There's no indication whether they are or not. Maybe they are. Could be the case. Yep. So, and then the only other thing I wanted to comment on this here is Bookstack. I have to admit, I had never heard of Bookstack before, and I had to go look it up. And it's actually free. And before I say it, I better double check. Yes, free wiki software. I don't know if it's open. Yes, free and open source. And that is Bookstack, and that's bookstackapp.com. So you can host out your own wiki infrastructure for your documentation, which that's a fantastic option. Yeah, Mike, be interesting to get your take on this. One of the things that Eric and I were talking about in our IT documentation episode was the cloud is great until you can't reach it. So there might be some critical system documentation that you might want locally.
Right.
And this could be an option for that, right? Realistically, where I sit in that whole on-prem versus cloud documentation discussion is, I think realistically, you have something in the cloud that is kind of your where you normally get your documentation, but you should have some sort of local on-prem backup should the cloud not be available. That's personally how I would do it.
And actually, I would take a little different spin on that. As I would go the other way. I would go local with a cloud backup.
Ah, okay.
And the reason for that is because if you do lose that connection, you still have that cache locally, right? And it's in case anything didn't get synced up into the cloud. So you could be looking at something. I actually, for mine, I don't have a real complicated home network. Just a home network. I have a lab network that's much more complicated. But a home network, it's pretty much just in one node. Right. I have OneNote notebook that basically contains all the information that I need for the home network. Now, for the lab network, that's a little bit different, right? That actually is up in actually in Confluence. So you can actually get a free instance of Confluence from a lesson, and you can run a wiki
I did not know that.
as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can, yeah. And it's only, you can't have like team members and things like that, but you can do
Right.
it as an individual.
Right.
So yeah, using that, but I mean, really, I think that having it actually in two places is never a bad idea.
Right.
And having it in three places is even better.
Yep.
But it's just a matter of synchronization, right? It's a
Yeah,
matter of
exactly.
making sure it's actually getting synchronized and it's in those multiple locations.
Yep. Yeah, so for my personal documentation for the home lab and whatnot, and even just for my own day-to-day notes, Mike, you and I have talked about this before, and folks on the show know where I'm going. I use Markdown with a GitHub private repo on the back end, and so
Yeah,
I always have that cloud repo as like that's the core storage location, but I have all the various local repos that
right.
I'm working with either on this machine or my Linux box. I actually have a virtual machine in my lab in my basement that on the regular does a pull so that within a couple of hours should always have one of the more up to date versions of the repo,
Sure.
right? So,
Yeah.
and then that
It,
gets backed up in my lab. So, yeah, I think maybe maybe four copies. Yeah. So,
yeah.
yes.
I I just remember a time when it was like people were one of two scenarios, I think, mainly was number one, they didn't want to pay for some kind of synchronization
Yeah.
between on premises and the cloud.
Yep.
Or number two, they were afraid to have the data up in the cloud. Now we're
Yep.
talking about a home network. Yeah, there could be leakage there. There could be in terms of IP addressing and I hope you're not storing clear text passwords, but hey,
Nope.
I won't judge, I'll
Nobody should.
um, but that was a scenario, right? That was many years ago. Now it's like, you can't even have an iPhone without having your iCloud backup, right? You can't even
Yeah.
have, even your local machine. If you have a PC, you automatically get, OneDrive shows up and wants you to,
Yep.
back up your stuff to OneDrive. So it's becoming pretty common. And I don't, from an IT perspective, you are a technical professional. I have a backup service that runs on all my home computers, and takes it both locally to a NAS device that I have and then also to the cloud. So it should be the same pretty much if you have a home lab.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, again, folks, appreciate the comments. Love talking about the stuff you guys are working on, working with, so
Yeah.
keep them coming. Again, you
Yeah.
can always comment on any YouTube version of the show. You can also do comments on Spotify as well. So if you listen to the show on Spotify, you can leave comments there too. Or if you just want to hit our inbox, you can always reach us at contact@sysadminweekly.com. And I guess while I'm plugging things, you can find all the relevant links to the show at www.sysadminweekly.com as well. So,
Awesome. That's
well,
awesome. Hey, I have just a quick question before you
sure,
start, Andy.
sure.
What's your, I mean, in real brief, I know we don't have a lot of time, but what is your take on the whole Ubiquiti thing taking over? I mean, literally it took over the home networking and even commercial market. I'm amazed by it. I mean, I was a big, Microchip was a big thing, right? And I was using Microchip routers and things like that. But then Ubiquiti came on and it was like, for some reason they just, I don't know, they're kind of like the Apple of networking because you get this box and you really don't know what it's going to do. And it's like really packaged really nice and pretty and it's,
Yep.
white. You plug it in and it's like you don't want to scratch it. You don't want anything because it's like pristine. I got to admit, I've been using Unify for a long time and I'm really impressed by, so, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm frustrated by some of the things, but I'm really impressed by what it does.
Yeah, so I can speak from personal experience. When I was, I've been doing this technical marketing thing for like 10
Yeah.
years now. I can't believe it's been 10 years, but here we are. With the exception, there was 1 year where I went and worked for a local MSP for a variety of reasons.
Yep.
And that MSP, we pushed Ubiquiti. And so that was my first time working with Ubiquiti. And I was kind of shocked at how rock solid it was
Yeah.
for most applications. I can think of maybe one time where we had an issue and it was resolved by support very quickly. I came from environments that we were always running
Cisco,
Cisco gear
yeah,
or Meraki gear, or
yeah,
I think I even ran into Juniper a couple of times as well too. So I mean,
sure,
like enterprise grade stuff. And you know what? Ubiquiti came in with the same level of stability and service for a fraction of the cost. And so when I saw all of that, I'd moved houses that same year, and when I moved into this house now, I'm like, you know what, I don't want to do the whole reboot my provider
yeah,
router provider
yeah.
provided router every week anymore. So that I went out and got a Unify UDM Pro and a couple of PoE access points, because the UDM Pro will do actually no, scratch that. I'm not doing PoE from the UDM Pro. I've got the power injectors for the access
Oh,
points.
yeah. Same difference.
Yeah, same difference. So the whole home network is Unify, Ubiquiti, and just the other day I logged in there for something, and I'm like, what's the uptime on these devices? I wonder. The APs had been up for I don't know, a year and a half,
Yeah.
and they've just been ticking along, so
Yeah. And it's like Cisco. I mean, Cisco was like that too. We would have routers, and I remember some jobs that would literally be running for like 4 or 5 years
yeah,
and never be rebooted. I
yep,
mean, I think that's bad practice. Number one.
yep.
Number two, it scares the crap out of me that you have something running that long and you've never rebooted it and it's never gotten firmware updates or anything like that. But just the length of time, length of service that it can provide.
Oh yeah,
It's pretty good. I know there are haters out there, and that's
there
fine.
is with any brand,
Um, yeah, yeah, there is. But I just wanted to get your opinion because he rose so fast in the
they
market.
really
I
did.
mean, they really did. So
And
it's pretty cool.
I will say that regarding uptime, the UDM Pro itself I have set to auto update, and so therefore its uptime is never more than
Oh yeah,
30 days
yeah,
or something like that. So
yeah,
the access points, those
yeah,
things hardly ever get
yeah.
rebooted. Only when there's a firmware update for them. So been very happy with them so far. So and
Cool.
while I'm still on the Ubiquiti soapbox here,
Sorry to get
there
you going on this.
no, it's okay. This is turning into a Ubiquiti commercial. Um,
You
they're
hearing
not
that,
sponsoring
Ubiquiti?
this.
Plug, 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 plug.
I will say they are not sponsoring this episode, just FYI. I'm not getting paid for this. Uh, but I will say it has a lot of the security, the core security stuff I'm looking for, right? So it's got strong firewall capabilities. It has a honeypot you can set up on the local
Yeah.
network. And so,
With
um,
WireGuard built in, which I use. I use a WireGuard VPN, which is built into
yep,
UDM Pro.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that honeypot is it's funny how it works. I've never had it go off
Oh, I
because of a
have.
legitimate
Yeah.
reason, but I was doing um I basically did a network wide IP scan because I'm like, okay, I need an IP address. I don't remember what exactly I have open. The honeypot went off because it saw Nmap poking at
Yeah.
it with a just for an IP scan, So it's
Yeah.
got a lot of cool
Yeah.
stuff, definitely.
Yeah.
So
Somebody tried to make a connection to my son's computer because he games, right? So
yeah,
they tried to make a direct connection and he had installed a new game and it opened up a door, a firewall port on his computer and he didn't know it. And so the honeypot went off when it tried to make a connection to that machine. And it actually deposited that person into the honeypot, so they couldn't do anything. But it was really kind of cool the way, and I got the alert and I'm like, what did you do? Oh, I
yep.
just
What's going
installed
on?
this. Well, uninstall it.
The UDM Pro also allows you to carve off multiple networks. So my son and all of his gear is he's on his own dedicated network, and I have
Yeah.
and whenever any of his buddies come over, they are on that dedicated network as well too. So, yeah. So it maintains that separation between all my production stuff and, so
That's cool.
anyway, we should do a whole episode on home office or home networking, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, before this episode turns into that, let's
Yeah.
move on to our Nerd Hour segment. And of course, this is not a segment that takes an hour. It's just a conversation about the nerdy, geeky things that myself and my co-host have been working on. And Mike, being as you're the guest, I will let you go first, my friend.
Okay. So, and this is just general things we're working on, or are we actually talking about AI?
It could be any nerdy, geeky thing that you've been working on.
Oh, okay. Very cool. So I've actually started to take the dip into ESP32 boards and, yeah, I started to take a dip into that, and it's kind of really cool. So I bought this kit, and I don't know if you've seen them, but they have these circular flat screens that you can put anything you want on it. You can put text on it. You can put graphics on them. They're just tiny, tiny little screens, and you plug those into a breadboard basically, and have an ESP or an Arduino type of OS that powers them. And I'm still putting it together, but it's going to be kind of cool because it's going to tell me everything about my house. It's going to tell me the temperature in the different zones. It's going to, basically just be a little display that sits in front of me at my computer here, so I can see the status of my house without having to look at my computer. It sits right in front of me. So I just find that interesting, diving into stuff like that and trying something new, first of all, but understanding how all that stuff can communicate
Right.
with your home and your home automation. So that's kind of cool stuff. I just took a journey into. So
That sounds like fun. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at that. And I
yeah,
think I'm gonna have to have you back for a a home automation episode as well too. So a
yeah,
little early in the
absolutely.
episode, for me to lose the ability to speak, but we're gonna work
Yeah.
through it here. um, so I will say for my nerd hour item, the thing that I've been working on lately, and folks on the show have probably heard me talk about this before. I do have a side project going on right now, and I have learned more about the ghost.org CMS platform than I ever set out to learn about. So
Okay.
yeah, so Ghost is, I think it started as more of a newsletter type of thing, right? Like a competitor to either Substack or Beehive. The thing with
Sure.
Ghost is it's open source, so you can see the bits if you want. You can also self-host it, and they still market it as like a newsletter platform, but you can use it for general purpose websites as well. And they have a fantastic security track record. Absolutely
Oh, wow.
fantastic.
Cool.
Whereas you look at something like WordPress, and I think I've said it on the show before, that things like Swiss cheese when it comes to
Yeah.
security vulnerabilities, depending on how you use it, right? So anyway, so that's what I've been working on, and pairing that with some caching services over at Cloudflare as well too. So
Oh,
I've been getting more into Cloudflare stuff lately than I ever have before, and just with their free tier rated stuff, it's incredible the services that Cloudflare offers with just the free tier.
well, that's informative because a lot of folks don't know about free stuff. They just think
No,
everything costs money, right? So you don't know it until you actually go out to the site or you actually try and sign up. I give a good example is that I use a service called Pushover, and Pushover sends out SMS, right? It just basically I can set up, well, as an example, I use it in home automation to send messages to my phone.
yeah, okay,
And I had no idea. I mean, it's basically like a $4 cost or a $5 cost, but they allow you to use it for free if it's non-commercial, right? But I didn't even know that. And they're like, when I saw the thing for it, they were like, "Oh yeah, it's $5," and I'm like, "Oh, $5, no big deal," but it's actually free. So you
nice,
really don't take it at face value when they say, they want you to pay for something because you might be able to get it for free.
yeah, for sure, yeah, it's good to know. So yeah, that's kind of been the geeky nerdy stuff I've been working on. So I suppose, Mike, we're 20 minutes in. We should probably start talking about Ollama, and really, this is good. It's all relevant information, and I see this show as as much a general talk around the table amongst sysadmins with you commenters, providing
We
commentary.
could go on for hours, Andy.
We
Let's
could.
go on for hours.
We could. So, but I suppose we should talk about our main segment today. And of course, we are talking about running LLMs locally using Ollama and Open WebUI. And I suppose what I'll start with, Mike, is I guess what I would say is like an Ollama 101, kind of a what is Ollama. And if you want to give the description, you can, or...
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, so Ollama is basically an open source platform that allows you to pull down large language models and run them locally on your own hardware. And I think one of the things that shocked me with Ollama is how simple it is to use. So most Linux distributions, you can just pull it down using your package manager. And then it functions very much like Git almost. And then it's like Ollama pull the name of the model, right? And right there with just Ollama, after you've pulled a model, and you can on their website, they have a whole bunch of models that are available for download. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you guys have links to that. But once you pull down a model, it's as simple as Ollama run the name of the model, and then you get a blinking cursor in your console.
Right.
And now you just start talking with it like you would ChatGPT. Now, of course, that's in your CLI. Most people don't want to use it that way, so that's where Open WebUI comes in. But we'll get to that. I think the other things that I would mention about Ollama real quick before I hand the mic over to you, Mike, is if you have a nice GPU in the system that you're running it on, so if you have an NVIDIA or an AMD Radeon of some sort, it will leverage that, but Ollama will still run on CPUs. So if you don't have a GPU, you can run it on CPUs. It's not as fast. It'll be a little clunky, but usable, right? And so I've got, for my test case here in the house, I have an old server. This server is like, 7 years old or something like that. I took an old NVIDIA 1050 Ti I had laying around, and I can run some smaller models on it with no issues, and it works great. So anything I missed in there, Mike? Anything you want to add?
No, well, the only thing I would add is that when you talk about the slowness of it, I mean, being on regular CPU, it's also based off the model size,
right?
Because it has to actually go through and look at the entire model. I mean, when you ask it something from a simple aspect of asking it a question or whatever, it actually has to look at the entire model as a whole,
right?
Not just pieces of it, right?
Right.
Because I don't know if everybody's familiar with how a model is actually structured internally, but it does take some work for, it's CPU intensive work for that to happen. So, and I will say also that a GPU, is great to have. I know some folks that have 2 GPUs.
Yep.
They'll run, 5070s or 5080s side by side inside of the same box, and, their AI just screams, basically.
Yep. Sure does.
And I will say also that a friend of mine has, an Apple M4, and on an M4, it is really, really fast.
Yep.
From when you have a larger model, not necessarily a small model, right? You're not dealing with a mini, you're dealing with a full GPT, or you're dealing with, Sonnet or something like that. So yeah, it is based off of, what you want to get from it. If you want deep research, or you just want, basic responses.
Right. And I guess another thing that comes up in the why discussion is like, okay, well, if I've got GPT and, Claude out there and all these other major LLMs, why would I want to use a local on-premise one? And the big one that I've seen come up time and time again, and maybe this is because I live in the security world, right, is people worried about their data being used for either model training or nefariously, right? And when you run it locally on Ollama, it doesn't go out to the internet unless you tell it to, basically, unless you configure it that way, which is one of the big advantages that I see.
Well, yeah, kind of. So just to clear something up here is that, I mean, when you're talking about agents, right? You have agents and then you have LLMs, right?
Right.
And it all depends on what the agent is doing. The LLM isn't doing anything. The LLM is sitting back there and it's just like, hey, I have all this knowledge.
The model's
You have
the
to,
model. Yeah.
yeah, you have to
Yep.
extract it from me, right? And the agent, depending on how that agent is actually coded and what options it gives you and everything else, that's really dependent on where your data could go. I mean, when you sign up with a Claude, when you sign up with ChatGPT, you sign up with local or LLM Studio or any of those other ones, they actually have a thing where they say, hey, we're not responsible. Your data could go,
Yep.
depending on what you do and how you configure it. Because if you bring in your own resources, if you bring in your own context, if you will, doing, using RAG or something like that,
Yep.
then you're introducing your data into that agent. And what that agent does with that data is really dependent on what you tell it to do and what its settings are. Because there are certain settings inside of Claude. If you've ever deep dived into Claude settings, Claude can you can have flip a switch and say, hey, share my results with the rest of the world. Or don't share my results with the rest of the world. So there's people who need to take a look at that from a security standpoint. If you're just using it for day-to-day things, I don't think it's, a big deal. But if you're in IT and you're using it for deep research or you're using it for your own IP information, you really need to be cognizant of what that agent is doing.
Right.
I don't know if you knew this, but they found a leak in the GitHub MCP server that was being run, both in Claude and in VS Code. And that leak actually allowed for, data that was being generated locally to leak out. So it's possible. So just be aware of that and be conscious of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess the reason why I always bring that up with Ollama and running, your AI workloads locally is if I want to cordon that thing off from the internet and make sure it's not talking out loud,
absolutely.
you can. Whereas with a public model like GPT or Claude, you don't have that luxury, right?
That's correct. Absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you don't have to, if you use a public agent, you have more exposure than because you can create your own agents. You can create your own agents. If you talk to Ollama via the command line, via CLI, that's basically an agent that's talking, right? So there's no way that data is leaving Ollama because you're talking directly to it. And you don't have a third party that's kind of intermixed in there. So
right. For sure. Yeah, so that's one of the big reasons that I see Ollama possibly being enticing for certain workloads, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We have people that are using it, especially when you're talking about, we have an instance actually for around databases, SQL, because, data, right? Data is usually kept, if it's not in flat file, it's going to be inside of a database or some kind of database, whether it's you can call a spreadsheet a database if you want to, but, at some point it's inside of some kind of data structure. And when you take a look at it, from an agent point of view, you really got to focus on how you're accessing that data and how you're actually getting to that data from an agent point of view and an AI point of view, and start going down that route of security and governance and compliance and all that kind of fun stuff.
It's funny, and this is probably a whole different episode, but we hear those words, governance, compliance, security around AI. This fact still bubbles up for me all the time is the fact that with this whole AI thing, all these years later, sometimes it still feels like we have this mentality of, no, let's do the innovation, let's get the thing out, and then we'll secure it later, right?
It's
it's a tale as old as time.
Yeah, it's a speed of technology.
Yep.
It really is. I mean, and it's the speed of getting something out. I mean, a good example is I have folks that I work with that are using, agents like Glee and Gemini, right? And
Yep.
they're going out and they're creating content based off of those agents. The thing about it is that they don't think in the terms of security. They don't think about, what could happen. So
Right.
now you have companies that are actually like building AI governance boards and committees, and they have to go through approval processes and all this other kind of
Yep.
fun stuff. So it's here, and it's only going to get bigger. It's not going to go away.
Oh, for sure. For sure. That
And
genie's out of the bottle.
absolutely, absolutely. And running locally kind of isolates you from that, right?
Yep.
And when you're dealing, like I said, with structured data, a lot of that you want is to stay local. So when I work on certain things, I run it inside of a local. I use local LLM, and I also use Ollama. Right, I use both of them.
Yep.
Local LLM is similar to Ollama. It's just another open source AI agent, if you will, that
Right.
can import models into it. It runs all locally. So I use those because I may be working on something that I don't want to touch the internet. I don't want it to get reported back to my company that I queried this, because everything you do inside of Gemini, if you're part of Google Workspace, believe it or not, your company gets to see what you look for.
Yep.
If they wanted to, they could take a look at that, because they own the Google Workspace, you don't. But when you're running it locally on Ollama, you own it. And it's, that's your territory. That's your domain.
Yep.
So that's something to keep in mind, depending on what you're working on. So I highly recommend not using your work AI agent to generate a new resume. I would highly recommend that you do that locally.
Yep. That's one good example use case, right?
Yeah, it is.
So,
Yeah. Or to write that exit, comment that you want to make to your manager, or something like that. You can do anything on your last day, but if there's a paper trail behind it, then you're in trouble.
you're right. That's good advice. Good advice. So, well, we've kind of talked about what Ollama is, Mike, the core of what we're talking about today. But a lot of people don't want to interface with an agent just on a command line, right?
Yeah.
And that's where Open WebUI comes into play. And basically that is the web UI that gets plopped down on top of Ollama.
Right.
And I'm guessing local LLM is very much the same way. You can put Open WebUI on top of it, right?
Yep. Open WebUI is just an interface that can talk to just about any AI agent via APIs, or hook right into them directly. I found it incredibly intuitive. I mean, when you first install it, it looks like ChatGPT.
It does. It really does.
I mean, how can you model it any different? I mean, I got to admit, when OpenAI created the ChatGPT web interface, they kind of did it right. To be honest with you, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's minimalistic. It gets you to do what you need to do. It's not a lot of bells and whistles. Now it is, but beginning it wasn't. But
Right.
Open WebUI accomplishes that, and I found it. The thing I like about it the best is I was like, I want to put a web front end on this thing. The first time I looked at Open WebUI, it's incredibly easy to just put in there and start rocking with it. I mean, literally, it couldn't be much easier, to be honest with you.
And you can run Open WebUI right in a container. I've used Open WebUI even through Docker as well as through Podman, and it's stupid easy to set up.
Right. And of course, for people taking advantage, you can run Open WebUI. You can rent it as a service, a subscription, if you will.
Yeah.
Out on the internet, you can host it up in Azure. I actually hosted an instance up in Azure that people can access. And we have an LLM that actually, a model that sits up in Azure. So it's very versatile. It's for me, I mean, this is just me, but I mean, when the guy who actually set it up, it was pretty easy to do compared to, some of the other things, dealing with multiple command lines and editing config files and all that fun stuff.
For sure. So let's put it this way. on my Linux box downstairs. It does not have its own dedicated GPU, but it has. I think I'm using the 7800G
Sure.
CPU, which has an on-die GPU in it, an on-die Radeon chip, and so it was more difficult and arduous to set up the video drivers for that on-die GPU than it was to get Open WebUI set up and running. So we'll put it that way. It's pretty easy. So
That makes sense.
Yep. And so the other thing that I like about Open WebUI is it really makes, Ollama, your on-prem local AI agent very accessible, even to people who are not technical people.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
for example,
very functional.
Yeah, for sure. So in the house here, I loaded up a couple of models. I think I did Llama 3. There was one or two others that I'm scratching my head at right now.
If you did the small ones, probably the minis, because
Yep.
when you look at the bigger ones, you're talking about some 9, 15 gig, 20 gig.
Lots of memory needed. Lots of video memory needed for that, right?
Yeah,
And so we'll get into models. This is a good segue into models, but just to kind of circle back and finish my thought here, I actually published the Open WebUI out to the house, and it's mobile friendly and everything. And so, my wife and kid, they could hop on and use it if they don't want to use one of the
That's
public ones for some reason. Yep. I created a local DNS address for it, so they don't have to remember an IP or anything. So, I mean,
Do you have your local context too? Do you have context that's local to just you, like, family stuff, or attaching to events or anything like that?
So I don't have it doing anything like that yet. Right now, it's basically just like you would use GPT is how I have it set up. But I do have it kind of like we talked about earlier, is I made sure that machine that Ollama's running on cannot talk outbound, right? So I've got rules in place that even if it tries for some reason, it can't, so because I wanted to make sure that's something that we could do, type of thing with Ollama and Open WebUI. So, but coming back to models, this is the next item I had on my list to talk about, Mike. And I think this is where I see a lot of people get thrown off who are just first kind of stepping into the space is you go to Ollama's website, or what's the community
Hugging
website?
Face.
Hugging Face.
Hugging
Yeah.
Face.
Yep. There's a billion models out there. And the designation that you'll often see with models is 1P, 3P, 7P. To be honest, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure what the P stands for. Now that I'm thinking about it,
I to be honest, I don't know either. I never really looked into it. I just know that the smaller numbers are usually the smaller numbers are usually smaller models.
Yeah, exactly. And so I found a chart one time, and I'll have to put this in the show notes so you folks have it, that basically says if you have a 7P model, it roughly equates to this much video memory.
Yeah, right, right.
If you have
they actually published that.
Yep. It equates to this much video memory, so that you can go and find a model that will fit within the boundaries of how much video memory you have available. And so, on my little tiny 1050 Ti GPU with its 2 gigs of onboard video memory, I'm only running mini models on it, right?
Yeah, right. But do you need more than that?
Yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, for the stuff that we're running locally here, the occasional quick script generation for myself, things like that. Little funny questions that my son asks it when he's joking around with his friends and stuff. I mean, it's fine. Those small models they're super fast.
Right. You also have to look at the date of the models.
Yes.
I mean, you have to look at its lifespan, because that's kind of important too, right? Because if you're using like a first revision that actually, was trained at the end of 2020, then you're 5 years behind already on relevant data, right?
Yep.
So you want to be careful on that, but you also want to be careful on when the model actually was created, because there are models that are coming out now that they're using just 6 months of data, and they're saying, "Oh, use our model." And I'm not talking about from the models. I mean, you look at Hugging Face and people will create models that are literally just like 6 months old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this provides really no value. It really doesn't. Interesting side note, I don't know the answer to this, but I know it's well over 10 years. You know how long Hugging Face has been around?
I
It's
see. I had
literally,
always
yeah.
assumed it was a fairly new site with the whole AI thing, but I'm guessing you're going to tell me that's not the case.
No, it's not the case. It's actually been around for a long time, and there's actually, something else before that, but they were actually the original repository. If you think about repositories like GitHub, they're the original repository of models, AI models.
Wow.
Yeah. So they have a long history, but it's kind of now people are just creating their own stuff and uploading it because you can upload your own models,
Yeah.
and have them share them out. But some of them are just, they're very specific, or they're not very relevant. They're not time relevant. They're not content relevant, or basically they're just models people upload because they think they did it. You're right, and they really didn't. So
Right.
you just have to be aware of that. And if you stick to the standards, if you stick to, things that everyone else is using, like Ollama models or, the GPTs that I think every agent uses the GPT models, right? The GLs.
Yeah.
And, even looking at Claude's models and, Sonnet and things like that, because
Yeah.
Sonnet is a great model. I use it all the time
Yeah.
because it's very technical. It's got a lot of technical information in it.
For sure.
It doesn't focus on like world history or anything like that, but it focuses on technical things. So, and they're even becoming more descriptive with them. I mean, in terms of when you go and you pick a model, because now you go into Open Claude, you open VS Code, you open just about any agent, you can have a drop down box where you can select the model. Even in Ollama, you open up Ollama, you can select the model. Like you said, Ollama use, you can select the model you want to use, right?
Yep.
So you have a lot of options there, and you have the ability to switch between models. And I encourage people to do this if they're actually, active in AI and they're trying out different models, is take a prompt that you would give an agent and give that prompt to one model and then switch models and then give it the same prompt and compare the response that you get between the two models.
Right.
And sometimes, I mean, I have seen ones that have given totally different answers. I mean, literally, there's no words that match in the response.
Right.
In terms of, it literally is night and day difference. But then I've seen some that are like almost identical. It's just like, I did a session and I used comparison of three different models. And I just asked it what the weather was in Bellevue, Washington, when we were doing the conference in Bellevue. And I just said, what's the weather in Bellevue, Washington? Well, number one, models don't have any concept of weather.
Right.
They don't have any concept of time. Okay. They don't, because they just store data. That's all they do.
Right.
The agent has to come up with that. So the agent is making that determination. And I used three different models on the back end, but the agent that returned it, I got three different responses. So there's a lot of variables there, and people have to understand that.
For sure.
I got a person who came to me the other day and said, "Well, I put this into Glean, which is an agent that a lot of corporations use, and I put it into Gemini, and I got two different responses. Why is that? It's all talking to AI, right?" I said, "Well, first you have to understand what the definition of AI is."
Right.
Because your definition of AI is not what AI really is. And number one, they're two different agents. They have two different ways of prompting the model. They have two different ways of delivering that question and that chat to the model, and what model they're using on the back end. So there's a whole bunch of variables there. So I think you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at models that you want to run locally as well. Because, you're using local LLM or you're using Ollama, you want to be conscious of what models you're actually talking to and chatting with.
Right. For sure. And all this talk around models and how they can be for just a 6-month period or focus on a certain thing. The
Yeah.
really interesting thing to me about Hugging Face is how it has grown into this very vibrant community
Oh, yeah.
of sharing models, right? In a way, it kind of reminds me of the old days of the internet, right? Where it was a very fresh
Well,
community.
well, not only that, but their interface is if you look at their interface, it looks like the old internet.
That might be
To
it.
be
Might
honest
be
with
it
you,
too.
I mean, it's not a very intuitive interface. Number one. Number two, when you do a search, you come up with all kinds of,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So I don't necessarily like the way that they run Hugging Face, but there's a lot of data out there.
There is. And where I was going with this line of thinking is I feel like up until recently, LLMs and agents, the GPTs of the world, have been very, for lack of a better term, I guess I would say generalist, right?
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
generalist type models and agents.
They're trained that way, though. That's
Right,
the way they were
exactly.
trained, right? Yeah.
Whereas now we've entered a world where if I want an agent that knows all about Ubiquiti gear,
Sure.
I could build one if I wanted, right? Pair that with
Absolutely.
MCP, and if there's an MCP server for that out there somewhere.
Absolutely.
MCP paired with all the different variations of models we have now, you could build just about anything that you would need AI wise in order to do whatever it is you're trying to do, right?
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. And a good example is that is I went out and looked for at the time I was looking to build or use a model as a training for a model that I wanted to create. Because you could do that, right? You can take somebody's model and you can use that to train your own model,
Yep.
right? Because it's going to use that data plus any extra context that you give it to create Mike's model, okay,
Right.
as an example. And I wanted to come up with one that was Linux command, a Linux command model.
Yeah.
And basically it would just give me a model that I could just query Linux commands because as you know, we were both kind of raised on Linux. And the thing is that you know, people who grew up in the Mac world and the Windows world don't understand the massive amounts of command lines that Linux
Nope.
actually
Nope.
has.
And I don't know about you, Mike, but I suck at remembering syntax.
Yeah, it certainly do, certainly do. That and whether or not the file needs tabs or spaces, but which is common in Linux. But
Right.
so basically, going out and I wanted to do that, right? I wanted to take that model and do that. But the thing is that building that it's not an easy task to do.
Right.
It's not something that you take very lightly, and you're training it, to get the result that you want. And some of the models that I found out on Hugging Face, boy, it's kind of hit or miss. It's kind of like going to GitHub and you're searching for something, and you're like, does this really do what I want it to do? Or is it, so yeah, it's a little bit sketchy, but you bring in MCP, and MCP is a great go-between, if you will.
Right.
And it allows for a lot more flexibility and portability to be able to take that and just distribute an MCP server and have it talk to a model that's out in the cloud that you created, or that's already out there, the Ubiquiti one. You want to create a Ubiquiti one. You create an MCP server, distribute that, and people can query your Ubiquiti model.
Yep.
And that's the cool thing about it. They don't have to download the model; they can just query it right off the MCP.
So they get the benefits without having to do all the legwork to get there.
Yeah.
Which is,
Although building an MCP server is pretty easy. If you've ever used like fast MCP, it's really easy to do.
Yeah, not hard. I was thinking more in terms of like training the model and building something very specific, right? It takes a little bit more work than spinning up an MCP service.
Well, it's not intuitive, right? You have to use Python. So it's like you have to know a little bit about the command line in Python and Linux and stuff like that.
Yep, exactly. So, well, what I wanted to end with, Mike, was some specific, I guess, SysAdmin use cases, I guess I would say.
Oh, sure.
And so kind of what I could see is anytime you've got I'm trying to think here. Anytime you have local data that is proprietary. You don't want it out on the public internet, but you want to crunch some AI stuff against it. That would be a perfect use case for Ollama on-prem or local LLM on-prem with
Absolutely.
Open WebUI on top of it. And
Absolutely.
if you have that knowledge on your team, train your own model for specifically what you need for your given project, right? So I don't know if you work for a medical research organization, you could build a model that contains, medical research that researchers could query against using Open WebUI, right? Again, I'm just kind of picking some stuff off the top of my head. I don't know if there's any models. If there's any examples you've seen, Mike, that you want to mention.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that are out there already. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard of awesome MCP servers, right? That's a GitHub repo that somebody put together that kind of curates, a whole bunch of MCPs that they found.
Yep. I think I linked that in our last AI episode. So I'll link it in the show notes for this episode too, folks. It's a fantastic list, by the way.
Yeah, it is. It is. And Microsoft has actually come up with their own as well. So Microsoft actually has their own MCP server lists that they endorse, or I shouldn't say that they endorse, but that they know about. Because people come to them, they want to link into VS Code or what have you, and they list all those out. But interesting enough is a good example is for folks who are out there who run something like a CMDB. Right? They run a management database around their infrastructure, around their hardware, around their software. It's inventory. It's with serial numbers and warranty dates and so on and so forth. That's, CMDB database, if you will. And, people have built MCP servers to actually make it easier to query those CMDBs. Because if you go into a CMDB, like ServiceNow, as an example, they have a CMDB, but their search sucks. I'll just put it out there, their search sucks. And, you can't ask it plain English questions. Well, I shouldn't say that. When I used it, you couldn't. Maybe now they put an AI agent inside of this search. I don't know. And that would be the right thing to do, Salesforce, if you're listening, because they don't service now, or Snow. But, the thing is that, you can get natural language queries. Remember those natural language queries? That's what you're doing when you chat with AI. You're basically going out and just asking a question like, what's the serial number of this piece of hardware? And it'll go out and it'll do that. I mean, for IT, that's very valuable.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
If you're a help desk, being able to ask a natural language question like, what is the serial number of this user's laptop? What's the BitLocker key of this person's laptop that might be in your CMDB, or even connected up to Intune and, in your, things like that. Those are really kind of cool things that IT can do.
Yeah.
From a technological standpoint. But then, you just take it from there. You expand it out. You get it into your IT projects, into your business projects that you're running inside of IT, anything else that you're doing. You can create a model context, MCP server that uses a model that you created that's specific to what you need. And it just makes your life easier. Everybody you work with lives easier. And like I said, it's kind of fun to do. It's not that hard to do. And to me, it's kind of fun. Some people might be like, I don't want to do that. Well, send it my way. I'll do it for you.
For the record, I think it's fun to tinker with too. It's just me. Really, I see it as all the benefits of AI. And at the same time, running it via Ollama, via local LLM and Open WebUI, it allows you to mitigate some of that data leakage leakage risk, right?
Yeah.
Which a lot of organizations are looking for today, So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I get the feeling, Mike, we're probably going to talk about AI again at some point in the future here. There's just so much to unpack here, right? So.
I would call you old school if you didn't, because that's all, that's pretty much the topic of conversation. Whatever you do nowadays is around AI. And to be honest, the daily conversations you have with your family.
Yep.
I have them all the time where they're like, well, I asked, remember I asked Siri, Well, guess what
Right.
Siri is? AI.
Yep.
I
And
asked
you can,
Google. I asked Alexa.
yeah, and you can connect Siri to GPT now too. I recently
No way,
discovered that.
really?
Yeah.
I did
Yep.
not know that.
You can
Oh,
actually connect it
wow.
with ChatGPT, and I don't think it always uses GPT, but for certain queries, I haven't tinkered with it a whole lot yet, but for certain
That
queries,
now
it can
that
forward it through to GPT.
that I would be a good example of what not to do if you're security conscious. And the
Yep,
reason why I say that is because
exactly.
it's kind of like Google Assistant. Whether you like
Yep,
it or not, Google Assistant is recording everything that you ask it and everything that you,
yep,
yeah. So you may not want to train a model and then distribute that model with that data.
right. And I will say the first thing I do with any Apple device, go into Siri settings and turn off the Hey Siri functionality.
Yeah.
And now that I'm
Not
sitting here,
everybody does that.
not everyone does that. I'm sitting here surrounded by 3 or 4 Apple devices, and I'm like, as I'm saying that question, I'm like, I just said, "Hey Siri," and
Yeah.
one of them is gonna say, "Yes, what do you need?" And completely invalidate my point, but that didn't happen. So I'm practicing what I preach, apparently. So, well, Mike, good to have you as always, my friend. Appreciate you spending some time with us today.
No, I appreciate it, Andy. I really enjoy this, and I got to tell you, man, it's a great show. It really is.
Oh, I appreciate that. We like to think so, and it's well, mainly it's because we have fantastic guests on like yourself. So
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, for sure. And those of you watching, thanks for spending some time with us today. And hopefully you found some value in today's show. As a reminder, you can find the show out on YouTube, on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, looking at other possible platforms in the future. The other thing that I did not mention earlier is we do have a bi-weekly newsletter as well. That's a companion publication to the show. You can find that at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. And again, like I said, that one's bi-weekly, despite the name being SysAdmin Weekly. Well, SysAdmin Weekly is about the show, the podcast, not necessarily
Yeah.
the newsletter, right? So, but you can check that out as well. Thanks for spending some time.